Okay, so there's a lot of new people in your fleet, so I've been getting a lot of calls, and so I reached out to Paul and said there's a lot of upgrades that people don't know of. There's people that are buying either new boats or new boats to them, and so the boats are showing up with some of the kind of semi-old upgrades that weren't happening. And I'm going to start off with your mast rake, because that's been one of the issues that's changed a lot in the last few years. Not this year, but as people are buying boats that are 3, 4, 5 years old, they haven't had the changes, and so they can't get to the numbers that you need to get to, that the sailmakers are asking for. So your rake, for most of the sailmakers, North, Doyle, and Quantum, you're all within a half an inch or so. I know some people do their own thing, which is fine, but for the most part, everyone's pretty long on their forestay, and they can't get there on a normal setup. So there's a few things that happened, and this goes all the way back to San Francisco, because San Francisco, with the big breeze, was the first time people really went back on the rake. And so what we found in San Francisco was, when you went way back on the rake, the swivel was hitting the mast. And so a couple things happened with that. One, extra load on the rig. And so we worked with Harkin to create a better swivel. This is the HP swivel. So one thing it has is, you can't see our stainless steel roller bearings, but then you can also see the tapered neck. And so it's the same pin to pin as the stock ones. So it's a direct change out, but it's going to work a lot better. But then also the tapered neck is going to keep it from rubbing on the mast. But that's not 100% what worked there. And so what we did is we went with a longer T-fitting. So this T-fitting here is 1 inch longer. And so what that does is it gets the swivel away from the mast that 1 inch further. And so that keeps the swivel from binding up on the mast. If you grab here's a swivel here, or sorry, here's a sheave here. And so what was happening is you're hitting kind of up on this part, and that would cause you not to furl. So if your jib isn't furling, this is because that's hitting, and this extra length will help. You'll see a lot of masts have a chafe material there. The one thing we also did with ours is we rotated the pin. So now the pin goes sideways through and it can't hit the mast. So the first thing you need to do to get your rake is get a longer fitting at the top. So it's 1 inch longer. That'll make a big difference. But a lot of the boats can't get there still. And so what we've done is one of two things. We first went with a standard off-the-shelf toggle. This is 1.25 inches longer. The combination might get you there. It might not. It just depends on what's going on.
And can I interrupt? Could you tell us where to put the toggle, please?
Yep. So the toggle goes at the bottom. So it would go just below the forestay onto that funky triangle fitting. So at the bottom of the forestay, your forestay pin will attach this way, and then this will go to the actual furler, and so that'll give you an extra 1.5 inches. So now we're actually at 2.5 inches longer with these, but amazingly enough, that might not be enough. If that's not enough, then you'll always go with the T-fitting, because that frees things up at the top. But we've made a longer stud for the bottom. So a standard bottom of your shroud is going to look something like this. And so this will give you a lot of range that you won't have otherwise to get to where you need to get to. Some people can get close, but then they can't pin this. And that's pretty important to be able to pin. We use a scar pin, and we use it at the top and the bottom. So we'd have 2 scar pins. I like to use colors, so that you can take a quick look and you can see that it's there. These things can break, So inspect them every once in a while, but you'll want to put a pin, a scar pin through the eye at the bottom and at the top. In that way, and try to keep these balanced. That way you can know if they're balanced. That way, if one would say break and you see, you don't know if it's changed or not, if it unspun or not, you'll be able to tell just by knowing that the one that didn't break is kind of here and the other one's not, where at the same distance. So if you try to even these up, that's going to make a big difference as well. So that's pretty important. So one thing to also always inspect, these turnbuckles are actually bronze, they're chromed over. And then everything else, both top and bottom, is stainless. So if something's going to go, it's probably going to be this turnbuckle barrel. So if your boat's getting older, both forestay and the shrouds, look at changing these out. The stainless is easy to inspect. You can't really inspect the bronze on this. You can look in there and see, but these will actually can strip out. We had a boat that did the Mixed Plus Regatta that they couldn't figure out what was going on. And so the other thing to look at, which we found out on that boat as well, is one of the issues is, see how this says up? They all say up now, because even the standard one, even though it looks like it's the same top and bottom, it isn't. And so only the top of it's supposed to spin. So look and see that there's a sticker up. There's also a circlip, so a ring on the top of the stock one, of the standard one. That circlip is up, so just think of gravity. The circlip will be on the top so it can't fall off. So check that if you have the standard one, check that circlip. That's very important, because if it's upside down, there's no bearings on the bottom. There's only bearings on the top because the top's the only part that's supposed to move. So the bottom will move, but it's rough. So just be careful about that, because that would be a problem, obviously. So, sorry, just checking that people don't need to get in. So does anyone have any questions about lengthening or why you go to this swivel, or any of these questions on the forestay and that type of thing?
So Ed, is there a maximum length that we're allowed under the international J70 rules? And if so, what's the minimum also?
Yeah, there's no maximum or minimum. The class hasn't gone there. We're kind of at a position where, they've never policed it. But the sails and the mast basically has kind of stopped it from going back any further, because if you go further back, then you start having issues with the way the mast sits in the boat and things like that. So I'd say the most I would know is 59 inches, but I don't think really anyone goes to 59 inches. Maybe 58 and a half is probably where they are now, depending on what sails you're using. It depends on the pin that you measure to. So if I say 59 inches, that's probably going to sound like a lot for a north sails, because north measures to the top pin, which is the bottom of the actual foresail, and not to the one on the furler drum. That difference is 1.25 inches, I believe. Pretty sure it is. And so if you're at 57-ish on north, that means you're at 58.25. So there is a difference there, but 59 all the way down to the furler drum would be a lot. 58 and a half would not be a lot. It'd be standard, but 58 might be normal. A Doyle is probably 1/4 inch longer.
So Ed, one more question. Okay, so you're for a north salesman, where are you measuring from and to?
So you're measuring from your swing mark from the top of the white band. We can show you a white band. So here's a mast. Sure, everyone has one of these sitting at their house. So the top of the band. So measure the top of the band. I write on my boat, I put an arrow to top, and you measure to the top. So when you transfer that to your forestay, then know that you're measuring to the mark based on the top of the band on your mast. And then north, you'd measure to the bearing point. So it'd be the center of the pin. On a north one, you'd be measuring it to the upper pin, which would actually be this one. It would be this one, where other guides would be measuring to the one below that triangular fitting piece. So north, you'd be measuring to here. So, yeah, any other questions on those?
So Ed, then you're adding 1.5 inches if you're a north guy to get to your number.
I think it's 1.25 inches, but your guide is going to tell you the right number.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, your guide is going to tell you the right number. So, I'm going to go straight back because starting with forestay, now we're talking about backstay. So, North Americans in Cleveland, we realized some people were kind of screwing around with the backstay length. There was never really a length, but it kind of goes into the rules that if it doesn't say you can change it, then you can't. But we also realized as a technical committee that if we're going far back on our mast, then that backstay is getting lower, and it doesn't take much at the front of the boat for the back to come down a fair amount. And so what happened was that triangle at the back was getting, lower. And so for your backstay to actually work, it was harder because that triangle was lowering and then you're kind of pulling sideways. So we realized there were some teams kind of screwing around, and we kind of found out because one team shortened an existing backstay, and to shorten one of these, it's hard to shorten just a little bit. And so it ended up being pretty high up and it was obvious. And so we don't feel like we feel like it's an advantage to have the V where you want it to be, but we didn't feel like it was an advantage to, allow you to make some changes. And since the need, because the right rakes were going back so far, the class just decided we're not going to have a length. You can pick your length, just kind of like you can pick your forestay length. And we did that because it's nothing to chase. If you end up being too short, it's way up in the air, and it's then at some point your windage is up high and you're not going to want it. So there's a battle the class wasn't going to fight once we decided on that, allowing that change. So what we did is we looked around to see what we would like. We talked to people about it, and what ended up happening for the most part is we've gone shorter 2 feet. We figured 1 foot didn't do enough. You came back fairly far. 2 feet gave that V still an angle, so it would work for you. And our number is now 23 feet. So your stock backstay would have been 25. We also kind of felt like they weren't perfect. So even though it was close to 25, not everyone was the same. And there wasn't consistency coming from the factory since there wasn't actually a measurement. So we went to 23. I can probably tell you 3 people that have asked for 22. It just seems to get way up in the air. And we've had a couple teams that are like, I want 22 feet 9 inches. Okay, that's fine. But that's getting a little technical. So shorter backstay is pretty important. We've gone to this coated, it's Dyneema covered in Dyneema. And the reason why we do this is it's slipperier, it's denser, and it'll clear the battens a lot better. So 5 millimeters is the spec. If you look at what came on your boat, technically that's 5 millimeters, but it gets fuzzy and it gets pretty big. So it'll look a lot bigger than what this is. This is a 5 millimeter backstay. Also, the one thing to think about, rope measurements are fairly arbitrary. They're what the manufacturer says they are. And a piece of rope is going to be fatter than what it actually says it is. So that's actually probably closer to 6, even 7 millimeters in reality, but it's considered a 5 millimeter. The one thing the class did decide to police is this ferrule here. They didn't feel like it made sense to allow people to go too small. And so this has a measurement which I can double check, but I believe it's either 22 or 23 millimeters that it has to be. You can always go bigger, but this is the one measurement on the backstay you have to have. So you have to have a ferrule that's 23 millimeters or greater. And what we did is we took the ferrules that we thought would be getting used, the Harkin 10. This is actually the Tyalaska 7. There's a few other ones out there, but basically this needs to be at least 23 millimeters. This one actually is probably 25. Let me let somebody in. No, maybe not. What's that say? I don't see anyone wanting to come in. I have a question. Can you let me into the meeting? I'm on an iPhone. I don't see them. I'm not sure why I don't see that. Look like John Dennerling. Oh, he's in. Looks like he's in now. Okay. Is there any questions on length and the material or this type of thing? If you're doing anything on your own, just be careful with what line you buy that's covered like this, because they make similar line that's actually for lifelines, and it's not as strong. It's gonna be plenty strong, and the rig's not gonna come down, but it'll stretch a lot more. And so if you go to whatever length you want to, it'll actually stretch more. So if you think you want to battle this on your own, which is a very difficult splice, that's fine. Make sure you're getting the right product, which there's a heated core in here. And that's the big difference. So when you make this shorter, 2 feet, you need to then realize that then the bridle needs to get longer. So the bridle, if you aren't sure how you want it, you could always add an extension on there, but make sure that, it's the same material, 5 mil. The lashing can be smaller. You need to have the one ferrule, but you can only have one ferrule. And so pretty much you'll want to go about 2 feet longer as well. With the lashing, that's the reason why you don't need to go more than 2 feet longer, because this lashing is then up to you, but that goes back and forth and allows you to loosen it and tighten it. So it's pretty tight. And the line would be pretty low in big breeze. So just remember that's something you'll want to do. And if you are doing a temporary to get your length, just make sure it's temporary, because the more times you have, extra lines or extra splices or knots, the more susceptible you could have to having an issue. So you don't want to have that. With these being important, then the blocks become more important too. The stock blocks come with this all lashed together, and that lashing over time will end up being pretty wide. So we've actually gone away with the lashing because it'll move a lot. We've gone with this setup, which is super simple and easy and not expensive. We've never had any of these break ever. I know people like to upgrade, especially this lower one, to a nicer bearing, a nicer block, or fly blocks. And some people even put these on the bridle. I haven't seen these break really ever, but sometimes it's just nicer to have a better bearing. So it's definitely an option. The other thing that's happening is we're having people doing continuous backstay lines. And so that way you can never be in the wrong spot. You can always just keep going through. And that's awesome. Like, it's really nice. But to travel with your boat, then you need to be able to take this off. So this has a shackle that you can take off. If you go with one of these options, you could do something like this where you have a soft shackle, and then you can just remove the one block and it goes down into your boat. I'd recommend, if you're going to do the continuous backstay, that you're set on your length and things like that. Some people on the control part want to be able to pull their arm all the way back, and that's how they measure how that continuous needs to be. Some people like it shorter. Play around with it. If you actually tie the ends together in a knot, you can actually kind of work it back and forth a little bit, and it's not that big of a deal. So in a beer can race or something that's not as important, you can do that. So just think about that if you are going to go continuous. But this is a super simple, easy option if you want to go that route. So this is, keeps it nice and tight so that bridle fully functions better. So any questions on that?
So Ed, I have another question on the backstage. So your gross tune, is there a minimum or maximum length that line can be?
There's no length. The J70 actually doesn't have any length requirements on
the backstay.
On anything they can think of. Jib sheets, they don't. Main sheets, they don't have anything. It's all kind of standardized itself. If you go with a shorter upper part, you probably need to be longer bridle and longer control line, just because that needs to get up higher. Some people put bungees on the blocks, so when you release, it pulls it up. Some people think that's too much windage. I kind of feel that if you have everything set well with these and the right bridle and the right backstay, then unless it's super, super light, it's actually going to take care of itself. But this is normally pretty good. A bungee can help. It's definitely not going to hurt. But that's kind of a preference on what people want to do. And just in general, if anyone, especially if someone watches this recorded later, if you have any questions, feel free, email, text, whatever. Most people know I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. If I'm not lately, we're just going through some issues with their son, but we had our first round of IVIG today. So we're hopefully moving forward there. So
Ed, like the backstay makes a huge difference whether or not you're a flicker or flickerless, right? So when since I have a flicker on mine, it's important for me to have the backstay on a little bit that's tempering the flicker into place. That's where I'm setting it so I don't get too much bounce in my forestick.
Yep. Yeah, your flicker is really going to act like where some people are using bungees and things, because it's going to help force that backstay up and out of the way, and so that's really going to be fine. You may need a little bit longer control line, because when it's off, that flicker is going to pull it up some, but it shouldn't be too crazy long. In general, 40-ish feet of backstay of control line is what you're going to want. And that needs to be 6 mil or bigger, which, like I said, it's relative. So like some people are going to want a small 6 and some people want a big 6. The difference is actually a fair amount. So it's just whether you want a small line or a big line. And if you go too small, yeah, sure, that's lighter for getting things up in the air, but number one, it's not legal. Number two, if it gets breezy and you got to pull on a string, it's not going to be very comfortable.
So you're saying the gross tune line has to be 6 mil?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm going to go to something just real quick and easy before I go into some of the purchases. I'll bring my mask into play here. So everyone, you can see this, right? So this is not a stock part. This was a temporary test, but this piece here is now allowed, and that's the second cleat. So the second cleat is now allowed on your spinnaker halyard. And the reason for that, there's been a lot of failures. Most people are switching to this block, which is a Harken block. It's plastic here, but one of the issues is this cleat, which you definitely should have the metal one, which would have come with the boat. If you have an older boat, you'd have the smaller size head knocker on your spinnaker. You do want to upgrade that. These are through bolted, so you do have to have the mast down and you have to get up inside of it. There's some tricks to do that, but just an extended ratchet block or some ratchet set would work there. But this is going to be much nicer. But this cleat is only rated for 300 pounds. And so what happens in big breeze sometimes is that can pop out of that. The cleat doesn't actually break, but it'll pop up. This will pop out, and it can ruin your race. It could ruin your day. And so they've allowed this second one. And what the second cleat does is, other than just adds another 300 pounds, but it also just, it now you have the load spread out between two different cleats. And so that's going to be a lot safer. And if you use the carabiner on the mast, it still works the same way. So that's a big plus. Another thing is, and someone else told me this, even though I had done this, I wasn't thinking it. They're like, we don't really have any problems with that. But one thing that can happen is the lazy part. If this was attached to your spinnaker going upwind, you can cleat right here, pull as hard as you want on the halyard, and your spinnaker is going to stay in your boat. And so you can use it upwind as well to keep your spinnaker in your boat and clean, and your halyard clean from getting flipped around the spreaders or that type of thing. So that's something to think about as well, because that's going to help there too. So if you're using a soak clip or something like that, you won't have to use that anymore. So that's a nice little feature as well. The kit from us is just this aluminum piece. We actually sell it with the hardware for attaching it. You just remove these screws and replace them with the screws that come with it, and then put it up like that. It doesn't come with the cleat, so if you have a cleat, you can use what you have. Otherwise, you just get another aluminum Harkin 150, and then those fasteners actually do come with it as well. So that's something that's nice and quick and easy to upgrade to, for a few reasons. So you don't come uncleated, and also line management. So that's a nice easy upgrade that you can do. Does anyone have questions on that? Okay. Any other questions before I move on to a simple one, which will just be the main halyard?
Real quick, Ed,
Yep.
I heard that you could add another cleat somewhere on the side of your mast to hold your spinnaker halyard.
No.
That's not so?
No, you're not allowed to do that. The Melgus 24 class has that, and the J70 class just has never allowed it. No reason. I've asked about it. We've had to have people take them off. It's just not allowed because it hasn't been approved.
Okay.
And so that's what this makes it nice, because if you add this, you don't need that other cleat.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. 6-to-1 main halyard. Can you guys, I don't know if you can see it. So let me move my camera real quick, and I can make sure you can see it then. Technical difficulty here. Okay. I may have to bring this down. So I'll bring this down. So the 2-to-1 came into play because people were taking the tail of their halyard and running it all the way through. Hang on, I got a little technical difficulty in my camera. Oh, it's stuck. Let me get this sorted. It's moving. Sorry. All right. Okay. So basically, people were taking the tail of their spinnaker halyard and they were their main halyard and taking it all the way through. And so, one, it was going to 3-to-1. Two, they felt like the issue was if you would have to pull your main down quickly, you can't. So what we did with the simple solution is we made the halyard like the jib, where it has a two-part. And so with that, then you can either hook that and pull it tight and do a 2-to-1, or you can skip the hook and you can just use a second line. And the idea is the second line's shorter. This one's not that short, but the second line's shorter, and you could then just stick the tail through and go down and create a 2-to-1, and that gives you the purchase you need. So that's that simple. One of the issues that you run into is because this line has to be fairly big for class rules, 6 mil, that the splice ends up being big. So coming out of the mast, it's difficult sometimes. You got to pop it out of the mast. We've had a few people just take a Dremel and make that slot a little bigger. It's not going to hurt the integrity of the mast if you go just a little bit bigger. So that's the simple upgrade there, is just giving yourself a 2-to-1.
Hey, Ed.
Yep.
When you go to a two-part system on the halyard, are you now required to carry the lower line on board?
Lower line has to be attached.
That's always attached. Oh, I guess you would
Yep.
need it, right? Because, well, hold on.
Yeah.
Maybe the question is more on the jib than the main.
Yeah.
So we also have 2 parts on the jib. Do we have to carry the second part on board?
Yeah. So nothing's changed in the way the halyards have been made. They're made attached, not detachable. And because they're made attached, they need to stay attached. Now, one thing that did change in this rule was the jib didn't change. The tail was always 4 mil. On the main, it went to 4 mil. So the upper part needs to be 6 mil, but the tail only has to be 4 mil.
Okay.
But these need to be attached and not detached ever. Both jib and main shouldn't be detached.
Okay.
So that's that. I'm gonna fix my camera real quick because we had an issue, and then we'll go into the jib on that. Okay. So typical jib halyard comes at 4-to-1. So if you look here, don't worry about the blue because that's what we've added on. It's an easy way to count is just count across 1, 2, 3, 4. And so if I pull this tighter, through the few years of the class, this setup has changed a little bit. So it started out with a hanging block, like just a standard one of these, and you use the middle for a line through it for a becket. And then they went to this bolted on. So these can be a little bit different, but basically you need to be able to have a single with a way to becket. So you start there and you go up, and then there was a 40 with a hanging 29 at one point. This was a hook up here. The problem with the hook was it was a small hook, so if you had too much load on it, it could pop. And so they wanted it quick release always for whatever reason. Now actually doesn't seem like it's a big deal anymore because a new regime, your jib can just get furled for an emergency. Taking it down actually wouldn't be quicker. So they've realized that. So this 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1 was standard. There's only one easy way to go to 8 to 1, and that's just to double this. So I'm going to drop this a little bit. So to double it, we do another block like this, and then we put a dog bone on it. The dog bone can then go into the jib eye. But so that does the thing, and then our kit comes, and then this line just gets tied at the bottom. A lot of people have messed around with lengths and where these float, so it's been hard for us to standardize the length of this strap. So we just sent it where you can just attach it down here. But we could always, once and you're happy with your length, you could give us a length and we could, splice it for you. But it's super simple. Is just literally, our kit has this block with a dog bone. You could make it simpler and smaller if you wanted to. We could do a soft shackle here or something. And then this just goes into the eye of the, it just goes into the eye of the jib. And so then it's easy to take on and off. I did see something that was pretty slick in at the Worlds that we decided to approve, and you could just literally stick a ferrule in there, and then this line could go through the ferrule instead of a block, and then attach. So you'd have it kind of like that. So it'd go up through the ferrule from the purchase and then down to the block. The ferrule would get stuck in there into the jib. So then you could, it wouldn't be a quick removal, but the jib doesn't come down quickly, so it's not as necessary. So basically, you're allowed to do any type of 2-to-1 addition that you want for the most part. There's nothing we've talked about as a technical committee that's or that we've seen that's not allowed because it's such a simple adding 2-to-1. But that's pretty important. Going from 8-to-1 to or 2-to-1 or 4-to-1 to 8-to-1. The big thing there is people like the ease sometimes is easier, so you don't have to flip it hard to get it off to ease your jib, and it's just a lot easier to work the jib halyard. So, any questions on that?
Yeah, Ed, yes. You say the bottom. Is the bottom the strap on the side of the mast or around the vang?
So I use the eye strap for the vang. So on all of the Southerns, there's an eye strap. If you have a Selden, there's kind of a little tang at the base. But where the block, there should be a vang block right here as well.
So same attachment for the bottom of the jib halyard.
Yes.
The fine tune.
Yes.
Okay.
And the new block, is that like a Harkin 40 or what is that? The top one?
Just a 29, because you're at 8-to-1. By the time it gets there, it's plenty strong enough.
Thank you.
I've had people just because, like I said, I haven't had one break. They upgrade to, something like this. These Allen blocks actually are not like, these things are like $200, so that's overkill. But these Allen ones are much higher load, and they have they're less than $50, so it's not a lot different than the 29 that Harkin makes if you are worried about strength. or you could use a ferrule. The problem with the ferrule is it doesn't run as smooth, and you could get it. It can be kind of jerky. Okay. Any other questions? So I'm just going to add a couple things that aren't necessarily new, but because of these changing of hands with boats and
I do have one more question, the jib
Yep.
fine tune.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm looking at the class rules. It says the halyard can be 4 millimeters, but the headsail halyard fine tune has to be 6.
That's the control line. That's this part.
And that's just for comfort of hands.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting rule that I'll actually talk to the I guess it'd be Mark now, because most of the boats actually, or I shouldn't say all the boats pretty much came with 5 mil. But 6 mil, you can use it. This is a small 6 that's here. But 5 mil's plenty. But 5 or 6 mil, you're probably not going to have any problems with. That's one thing there's a few things that get missed with the class in the rules, where they look at a boat and they say, oh, well, it's 6 mil because it wasn't published originally. And then we got to go back and be like, well, they came with 5. We had an issue with the traveler car on the main where it was approved to go to the wider one, but the paperwork didn't happen. And then the guy who approved it wasn't there anymore. And so they're like, okay, well, we can't do that. But then the new boats came and they had that one. And so Polk did a really good job of cleaning up a lot of that stuff. So if there's something that you have a question on that's not really a huge issue like that size of a line, then just let us know and we can make sure we clean it up. So a couple things I'm going to just do real quick, and this is just suggestions based on what we've sometimes heard or seen. What I say by heard is the halyards. If your halyards are squeaky, especially your spinnaker halyard, it probably means your shiv is done. And if you have a stock shiv on a southern mast, I'd recommend upgrading to one with bearings and aluminum. This would be the jib is the bigger one, and the spinnaker's the smaller one. The bigger one also works for the outhaul. On the Selden, they're a little bit nicer out of the bat. You can retrofit the spinnaker one. It is a lot nicer because it's got a bigger entry, but that's a recommendation too. I had a couple questions on glue blocks recently. They don't really come with the jibs. I think some of the sailmakers do, but not necessarily. The 40 millimeter has become the standard really since about the first or second year. They originally came with 29s, but they just weren't big enough for the rope size. The Harkin lash one, that they call them a T2, has been what people have liked. We worked with one of the high-end teams to go with the dog bone, because what happens is, one, they go through each other as well. So you can see they're just not just going through the jib. But they go through the sail and then to themselves afterwards. And what happens here is when you in-haul, it pulls straight on the jib. And I can send a video if you need one, because I do have one, instead of twisting the jib up underneath. If you use the standard ones, even the long ones, the jib will kind of twist up underneath a little bit, so it won't be as clean when you're in hauling. I've seen some of the sailmakers actually go through the eye like this. Only reason why I recommend against that is these blocks are plastic. if you look at them closely, they'll break. And so I just recommend not breaking, because once this breaks, the bearings will come out and you're useless. So I think just make sure whatever method you're using is the most durable and it's going to help you out. But try not to have something that bounces back and forth in there that could break pretty easily one windy day and you could be broken. You could do soft shackles if you wanted to or something like that. But I know that was something that came up recently with your fleet, someone asking what's the best option. So I guess only other thing,
Real quick on that same subject, you're talking when you,
Yep.
I've got dog bone. So you're saying you put the dog bone through the clue, and then it goes between the two lines of the other dog bone?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. So once you go through, you actually go through each side as well. If you weren't doing that, it's probably not going to come out. But if you do this way, you definitely won't come apart.
All right, thanks.
Yep. Yeah. So the only other things that are kind of big are now there's a million kinds of ratchet blocks you can get with the different grips. I'm happy to talk individually or whatever, but one thing that's been big early before we had all these options, we're just going with the Ratchematic. What's nice about the Ratchematic is it's sensitive to the pressure on the line. And so they work really well. And so the boats come with the switch. There are a few people that like the switch still, but the Ratchematic's just much nicer. There's what they call the HTE, and what they've done with the HTE is they've just taken the bigger spring and they put it inside the smaller block. What that does is it just releases quicker. I like them on the jib, so you can do a quick release, and it is pretty nice. I actually, when they first came out, I didn't really think about switching it, and Jeff Madrigali is like, no, they really work. They work. So we tried them, and I was like, wow, it did make a difference. They also are going to be more bulletproof because it's a bigger spring. So if you're looking for something, that's nicer. It is better. Grip wise, you don't normally need as much. I feel you don't need as much grip on the jib, mostly because you also want to release it quickly. But on the spinnaker, some people like more grip. And if you like more grip, I don't think you need the HTE on the spinnaker because you're not doing a quick release. The pressure off of it and allowing it to roll should be enough in a jibe. But the grip is nice at times to have more grip, especially in bigger breeze or something like that. And you can probably get away with the smaller spin sheet as well. But there's preferences. There's two times the grip is what the silver one's called, and then 1.5 times the grip is what I call the titanium one. Though I really can't tell the difference between these two, but I can tell that they're better than a standard one. So if you're seeing or asking why people are doing the different blocks, the Ratchematic is just much nicer. You get in a lighter breeze, you don't have to worry about turning off a switch, or if you're in light breeze and the breeze picks up, you don't have to worry about turning a switch back on. So that's much nicer with just the Ratchematic. The different grip is a preference thing, but it's nice. I kind of feel like you can go with a smaller spin sheet and the extra grip, but I would recommend going with a Polytech that's going to last a lot longer. But you can go down to 7 mil. Kind of our standard now is 7 mil Polytech spin sheets because it has the wear, it's better. Cost doesn't go up because you're going down to 7 mil. And if it gets light, it's a smaller line too. So that's just one final thing that I'm happy to take any other questions. Go ahead.
Have they removed the number of auto ratchet blocks that you're allowed? Now you can have them on all of them.
You can have you can have 5 ratchet blocks on the boat. It doesn't matter if they're auto ratchet or regular ratchet.
Okay, I thought at one point in time you were only allowed 3 auto ratchet out of 5.
Nope, you can have as many auto. It's just ratchet blocks. You can have 5. So I think the only time that's come in play, that number, is because there's some people that were putting a ratchet block on their jib halyard fine tune, which isn't a bad idea if it was legal. It's just not legal. I think the 8-to-1 solves that problem. But no, the ratchet block, whether it's auto or not, you can just have 5. So should have 2 jib, 2 spin, and 1 main.
So Ed, if we wanted to order the one that is, I'm just looking for the right terminology. If we wanted to order the ones for the spinnakers that are the 1.5 or the 2, what do we say to you? What's the right way to order it from you? What these 2 that you just showed us, what do we call them?
Extra grip.
Extra grip. Okay.
Yep. And they're literally 2x grip and 1.5x grip. And if you don't know, I guess if you think you really need a lot of grip, then go to the 2. If you just think you need more grip, then I would just choose. If you look at them, it's pretty, you can tell a difference. You can definitely tell a difference physically working it and playing with them. And I was given these blocks early on before they were colored, and we marked them up so we knew what they were. And I paid attention to it, and I really couldn't tell that much. I definitely could tell they were better than the regular. Okay. So I do recommend them. If I was setting up a boat, so just for any curiosities, I would do the 2 times regular grip, the HTE regular grip, so the better spring for the jib. I would do 1 of the extra grip regular spring for the spinnaker. And then I would go with the Ratchamatic regular grip for the main with the HTE if I was like wanting perfect. And the only reason why I say that is I would only do it on the main because it's stronger and less likely to break. Because you don't want to be out there and you break a spring on a main, because then it's miserable. And so I would only get that HTE because it's bigger and stronger, not because of the quickness, even though you don't really ease that quickly on the main.
All right.
But
So
that extra strength.
jib and main are HTEs, and spinnaker would be called an extra grip.
Correct.
And then you can specify 1.5 or 2.
Yep. And if you want to be fancy, you can go with red on the main if you want to. Any questions on anything, either this or other things? And like I said, feel free to reach out about anything else as well.
I have a question. If you wanted to replace the bang strop, the one that goes through the boom, southern spar, how do you do that?
I mean, if it's just there's a pin in there, and so you can even usually do it with the line. I actually don't have. I go straight with 1 line. I don't have the strop and then the soft shackle one. I just do a long one like this, but on the 57. But you can either just get a wire that you can just bend it around, or even a stiffer line, you can kind of bend it around and it'll go around there. So it's not super hard.
Okay, because mine is a continuous splice.
Around it.
Yeah. So you would just replace it with 1 line and.
Yeah, it would look like this one.
Yeah,
does.
I understand. Right.
It'd just be longer, and it's a 57 block. So this would be this is 3 mil. I'd make it 4 mil. And I'd make it probably about that long. Yeah, this can actually be a 40 mil because the Seldon masks come with a 40, but I wouldn't do a 40 mil T2. Sounds strong. I'd want it stronger, but. One thing I would do is check all these on your boats. The white ones, check them all. They get old and they'll break. Everyone, just look at them. Usually you can tell if they're looking tired, start replacing them. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks everyone, and feel free to reach out at any time. If I'll get back to you if I'm not. Next couple days for us are a little busy with Cole doing some treatment, but then hopefully our life starts to get back to normal soon.
Great.
And Ed,
Thanks,
I just want to
Thanks, Ed.
say we're really grateful. We know everyone knows you guys have got a ton going on in your personal life. So for you to take the time to do this with us right in the middle of everything that's going on right now, it's really generous, and we're grateful for you. So thank you for doing it.
Yeah, thank you.
The sailing world has been very good to us, and I don't mean from a business standpoint at all. I mean from a personal standpoint. This also helps us. You know, I have my job, which isn't, you know, it's a job because I have to, but I like doing it, and I love doing this side of things. But it also is, you know, gets me a release from some of the difficulties we're having. We're hopefully in a good place. Becky's got her photography, so she's doing that, and we're home doing that. So it helps, but just the friends and the, I mean, really the friends, because a lot of our clients have become friends that have reached out and even just chatted. I kind of told one of our clients, who I'd call a good friend, that if I ever ask you to meet me for a beer or coffee, I need it right now. So this is kind of my beer or coffee. It's great.
Well, we're definitely grateful. So thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
Good luck with all that, Ed. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
No problem.
Oh, and Ed,
All right.
would you send me the link of the recording so I can share it with everybody else in the fleet?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Yep.
All right,
I'm going to
great.
get this to bed, and then I'll get this sorted, and then I'll get it out to you.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Ed.
Yep.
Thank you.